This video is going to discuss how to add labels to a views plot. We're going to work from the same plot that we just finished in the prior video, namely, as shown in the middle, a Gaussian curve, shown in red, with a blue line, vertical blue line, that indicates the mean value, and then a green line that indicates the mean value plus one standard deviation, and a purple line that indicates the mean value minus one standard deviation. It might be nice to be able to tell people what these lines are. And so, to do that, we're going to just add some text to this plot that does so. Alright, so let's see how to do that. First, we need to click on the label button. Doing so, we'll just add over in the editing pane, label 1. As everything, when we add it, it's already selected, and so we can see its properties in the properties pane directly below. The first thing that we want to do is add our label. Let's say we want to label the green curve. The green curve is the mean value plus one standard deviation. It also has a value of 934. So let's go ahead and just type in that value, 934. I press enter and we'll see it appear in the plot. It's hard to see entirely because this little black thing that you can see my cursor changes when I move over it is covering up. That little black thing is something I can use to click, hold, and drag, and I can move this now around as I like. Right? So let's just drag it up over here next to the green line, and before I release it, you'll see that it says 934 where it used to be, so that number won't change until I release my mouse button. Now it's moved up next to the green line. If I want to see this label without that black square, what I need to do is deselect this in the editing pane. So I can just go over to the left to the editing pane and click on anything else, like function 4. And now you'll see that 934 is easy to read back in the plotting area. We still want to play around with 934 a little bit, so let's go back to this label. One thing, if we don't want to drag and click and drag around to move the location, we can also use the X and Y positions. A few things to note about here is we have the actual label we're using, 934, the X position, the Y position, and this also says our position mode is relative. We'll address this relative position mode a little bit later. First, let's just look up here. If I wanted a little bit more precision, maybe I only want this not at 0.686, but at 0.68. I'll just delete the 6, and when I hit enter, if you look at the label, it might shift slightly. Okay. Maybe the Y position, I want it a little bit lower. Let's see what happens if we set it to 0.75. It moves down. Alright, let's change some values real quick to make it clear what we mean by relative. Relative is essentially dividing up the plot area from the edge, the lowest X value, to the highest X value, and from the lowest Y value to the highest Y value. And we're entering into here the fraction where we want to be. So if I change the X position to 0, when I press enter, it will move all the way to the left. Oh, I'm sorry, it automatically selected 0.686. It remembers we were there before, so let me just delete to 0 and press enter. Now the numbers moved all the way to the left. Something else I can do, maybe is set Y to 0. And when I do that and press enter, it'll move down to the bottom. So we've set it at the 0, 0 position, which is in the bottom corner here. Let's put this back where it used to be, though. That was a pretty nice spot. 0.68 for the X, and then 0.75 for the Y. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. However, 934 is not extremely descriptive. We might like to say, what do we mean by 934? So let's just type into description real quick. 934 equals the mean plus one standard deviation. When I press enter, that will all be added. And one thing you'll notice is that now this text box extends too far. What I would like to have maybe is a few lines where it doesn't run off the edge of the plot. This uses a type of formatting called LaTeX formatting. You can look this up if you like. LaTeX is the name. And the easiest way to enter a carriage return or a line break would be to simply put in double backspace or double backslashes. I will put in a double backslash before the mean, and when I hit enter, you will see that the mean has now dropped down to the next line in the plot area. Now I have two lines here. If I wanted to maybe make them aligned, I could go back to here and put some spaces before, after the backslashes, but before mean, and that will move mean over. And then maybe I could have another set of backslashes after plus and some more spaces. And now you see we're starting to fit something onto the plot. This doesn't look beautiful, of course, and part of the problem is that we're using long words, mean and standard deviation. There are symbols for this though. Typically for mean we'll use the Greek letter mu, and for standard deviation we'll use the Greek letter sigma. Luckily we can add those in very simply. I'm going to delete this back to equals, and instead I'm going to use a backslash, which tells the interpreter that we're going to have a command, and just write the name of the Greek letter I want. That would be mu, mu, plus backslash tells it again, I'm going to give it a command, and the command is I want sigma, the Greek letter sigma. Alright, and if I press enter, we'll see that gets added to the text box. And now I have something that looks a little bit more clear. I'm going to click on function 4 so you can see it. 934 equals mu plus sigma. If we want to make this a little bit more clear, maybe we go back and we say plus 1 sigma. Enter. And now we have a label that clearly tells us 934 is the mean plus 1 sigma. Great. That seems to work pretty well. Let's go ahead and add one for the lower end. So I'm just going to, as before, I can say copy, paste. I now have something that's written right over the top of the second one. That's label 2. And let's do minus 1 sigma. We know that has a value of 770, and that's 1 mean minus 1 sigma. So I'll change the plus to a minus and hit enter. And now you can tell if I click back on function 4 that I have two labels written over the top of each other. This is not a problem because we're just going to shift that over, not on top of each other. So let's go back to label 2. Right? And all we really want to do is maybe move the X position. Let's move it over to the left, so 0.33. Not quite far enough. How about 2.5? That seems all right. Okay, so we'll leave it there. Our last step for this video is to add in the label for the mean. So let's just copy label 2, paste in label 3. Let's say this is the mean. So how about we put that first this time? Backslash mu, that's going to give us the symbol for the mean, equals 852. Then I can either move this over, or I can type in by dragging it around, or I can type in kind of where I think it should be. Something that I'll bring up here though is let's change the position mode. By going to the position mode and changing it from relative to axis, now what happens is that the X and the Y positions are not relative to the smallest and largest X and Y values, but are actually pinned to these values. And that can be nice to use when we actually know the value. For instance, I happen to know that the mean is 852. So I'll put this at 852. on the x-axis. We don't see it yet because the y position is at 0.566, and we can see that the highest y value is at 5 to the minus third. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's go, maybe I want it at 3 times 10 to the minus third, and now we see that it has appeared. And again, if I click off of this label, maybe back to function 4, we'll see it's there. One thing I don't quite like about this, when I look at it, is that even putting it right next to its value, it runs into these other lines. And so maybe something that we could do to control that is take this and turn it sideways so that the text will run vertically. We might not like the way it looks, but at least let's show how we can do that in case you decide that's something that you're interested in. We do this by selecting label 3, and then once we've selected label 3, going over to the formatting pane. And when we're in the formatting pane, under the main section that's indicated by this triangle, we can see that there's a section called angle. I'm just going to select this and change it to 90 degrees. We'll see when I hit enter that changes the text in the middle. Now the text is oriented reading top to bottom. If I want to change that, I can put a negative 90 in front. And now it'll read bottom to top. So let's have a look at that. We'll get a clear view of this just by clicking off on something else. And now we can see that I have 3 labels, one that's near the purple line, one that's near the green line, and one that is oriented up to down along the blue line. None of this is beautiful, but at least we're starting to see how to input labels in places where we would like to have. And we know we can do it by dragging them around where we want them, inputting their relative position on the plot surface, or by pinning their actual position to the numbers that are specified by these axes. We'll take a closer look in the future on how to control more about making this look beautiful, but for now, being able to insert them is enough.